It started with a look, the kind of look that makes you forget you're wearing a wedding ring. It was a heavy, lingering gaze that traveled from my eyes down to my lips and stayed there just a second too long. In a quiet house filled with the ticking of clocks and the soft hum of the refrigerator, that look felt like a shout. I've been married to Julian for 12 years. Our love is a comfortable old sweater, warm, familiar, and slightly frayed at the edges. Julian is a good man, a steady man. He is the oak tree in the storm. But lately the oak felt like it was casting a shadow that was a little too cool, a little too dark. We had drifted into a polite silence, the kind where you know what the other person is thinking before they say it, so you both just stop talking. Then there was Marcus. Marcus has been Julian's best friend since they were boys. He's the jagged lightning to Julian's steady earth. He arrived 3 months ago, staying in our guest suite while his own home was being renovated. First it was fine. We had dinners together, drank wine, and talked about old times. But then the air in the house began to change. It became thick, charged with a static electricity that made the hair on my arms stand up whenever Marcus entered a room. I remember the first time I felt the shift. It was a Tuesday evening, and Julian was caught up in a late conference call in his study. I was in the kitchen, reaching for a wine glass on the top shelf. I felt a presence behind me before I heard him. "Let me," Marcus whispered. "Before we start, if you're the kind of person who believes love finds you in the quietest, most unexpected moments, hit that subscribe button right now. Because Hearthside Stories is about to become your new favorite place to fall in love with a story. Stay till the end because this one has a moment you will not see coming." He didn't just grab the glass. He stood close, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his chest against my back. His arm brushed mine as he reached up, a slow, intentional friction that sent a jolt of lightning straight to my core. He didn't move away once he had the glass. He stayed there, his breath warm against the nape of my neck, smelling of cedarwood and expensive scotch. "Thank you," I breathed, my voice trembling more than I liked. "Anytime, Elena," he said. His voice was a low growl, a vibration I felt in my bones. When I turned around, he was looking at me with an intensity that burned. He wasn't looking at Julian's wife. He was looking at a woman he wanted to reach out and touch. I should have walked away. I should have gone to Julian's study and sat on his lap. But I stayed. I let my eyes trace the line of Marcus's jaw, the way his shirt pulled across his shoulders. The guilt was there, a dull ache in my chest, but the excitement was louder. It was a drumbeat, steady and insistent. Over the next few weeks, the boundaries didn't just blur. They dissolved. It was in the way Marcus would linger in the doorway while I was reading, his eyes tracing the curve of my legs. It was in the way we'd find ourselves alone in the kitchen late at night, the house hushed and dreaming, sharing whispers that felt far too intimate for friends. Julian seemed oblivious. He would go to bed early, or spend hours buried in his work. He was there, but he wasn't present. He'd kiss my forehead and tell me he loved me, but his eyes were often looking past me, at some distant horizon I couldn't see. I felt a pang of loneliness so sharp it staggered me. I loved him, but I felt like a ghost in my own home. Marcus made me feel solid. He made me feel seen. The first accident happened on a rainy Thursday. The thunder was rolling over the hills, a low guttural sound that seemed to echo the restlessness in my heart. Julian was away for a business overnight. Marcus and I were in the living room, the only light coming from the dying embers in the fireplace. "You're quiet tonight," Marcus said. He was sitting on the sofa, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. "Just the weather," I lied, hugging my knees to my chest on the armchair across from him. "You're a terrible liar, Elena." He stood up and walked over to me. He didn't sit on the arm of the chair. He knelt on the floor in front of me, placing his hands on the velvet fabric near my knees. You've been hovering on the edge of something for weeks. We both have. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. Marcus, we shouldn't. I know, he whispered. His hand moved just an inch, until his thumb brushed against the skin of my ankle. The contact was electric. But tell me you don't feel it. Tell me you don't feel the way the air thrums when we're in the same room. I couldn't answer. I couldn't breathe. He leaned in, his face inches from mine. I could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. The scent of him, rain and heat, overwhelmed me. When his lips finally met mine, it wasn't a question. It was an arrival. It was a slow, deep exploration. A taste of forbidden fruit that was sweeter than anything I had ever known. My hands found their way into his hair, pulling him closer, desperate for the friction, the heat, the sheer reality of him. We didn't go further that night, but the seal was broken. The line was crossed. For the next month I lived a double life. By day, I was the dutiful wife, planning dinners and checking in on Julian's day. By night, or in the stolen hours of the afternoon, I was a woman possessed. Marcus and I found corners of the house that felt like a different universe. The guest suite, the laundry room, the pantry. Everywhere became a site of whispered promises and heated encounters. It wasn't just about the physical. It was the way he looked at me when I spoke, as if my words were the most important thing in the world. It was the way he'd touch the small of my back as we passed in the hall, a secret signal that made my skin flush. We were careful, or so I thought. We never stayed too long. We never left marks. We were shadows moving in the dark. But the guilt was a heavy veil. Every time Julian smiled at me, a knife twisted in my gut. I felt like a thief, stealing moments of passion and paying for them with my soul. I wondered how I could love one man and crave another so desperately. I felt fractured, split down the middle. One evening, about a month into the affair, Julian came home earlier than expected. Marcus and I were in the library. We weren't touching, but the air was heavy with the aftermath of a conversation that had been far too close. We were both flushed, our breathing not quite even. Julian walked in, his briefcase heavy in his hand. He looked at us, his eyes moving from Marcus to me, then back again. My heart stopped. I was sure he could see it, the guilt written on my face, the scent of Marcus still clinging to my skin. "Evening, Julian," Marcus said, his voice remarkably steady. "Marcus." "Elena," Julian replied. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. "I think I'll head up early. Long day." He walked over to me and kissed my cheek. His lips felt cold. "Don't stay up too late," he whispered. As he walked away, I felt a wave of nausea. He knew. Or he suspected. How could he not? The silence between us in the following days was different. It wasn't just empty. It was pregnant with unspoken words. Yet Julian didn't pull away. If anything, he became more attentive in a strange, quiet way. He would watch me from across the room, a small, unreadable smile on his lips. The tension reached a breaking point on a Friday night. Marcus was leaving the next day. His house was finally finished. The thought of him being gone, of the house returning to its cold, ticking silence, was unbearable. Julian had suggested a final farewell dinner at home. He had cooked, a rare occurrence, and the table was set with our finest silver and candles. The atmosphere was surreal. We sat there, the three of us, sipping wine and eating steak, while the ghost of my betrayal sat in the empty chair between us. "To friendship," Julian said, raising his glass. His eyes met Marcus's. There was a long, heavy pause. Marcus cleared his throat and raised his glass. "To friendship." After dinner, the wine had made me bold and reckless. Julian went to the kitchen to clear the plates. Marcus followed me into the darkened sunroom, where the moon was casting long silver fingers across the floor. "I can't let you go," I whispered, my back to him. "Elena, we have to stop," Marcus said, though he moved closer, his shadow merging with mine. "Julian is my friend. It's too much." "Then why do you look at me like that?" I turned around, my eyes wet with tears. "Why do you touch me when he's not looking?" He didn't answer with words. He pulled me into his arms, crushing his lips to mine with a desperation that mirrored my own. We were reckless. We were in the sunroom, just a few feet from where Julian was washing dishes. The danger only added to the fire. His hands were everywhere, tracing the curve of my waist, tangling in my hair. I felt a wild, untamed hunger, a need to be consumed. We were so lost in each other that we didn't hear the footsteps. "The candle went out in the kitchen," a voice said. We sprang apart, gasping. Julian was standing in the doorway, a flickering lighter in his hand. The small flame illuminated his face. He wasn't angry. He wasn't shouting. He looked peaceful. I felt the world tilt. My knees grew weak, and I grabbed the back of a wicker chair to stay upright. "Julian, I can explain. It's not what it looks like. I mean, it is, but—" "Sure, Elena," Julian said softly. He walked into the room, the lighter still held high. He didn't look at Marcus with betrayal. He looked at him with a strange kind of gratitude. Marcus was frozen, his face pale. "Julian, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. I tried to stay away, but—" Julian held up a hand, silencing him. He walked over to me and placed a gentle hand on my cheek. His touch was warm, warmer than it had been in years. "I know," he whispered. "You know." I echoed, my voice a mere breath. Julian nodded. He looked at Marcus, then back at me. "I've known since the second week Marcus was here. I saw the way the light came back into your eyes, Elena. I saw the way you started dressing for dinner again, the way you hummed in the shower. I saw the way Marcus looked at you. Like you were the only thing that mattered in this world. I was trembling so hard I thought I would shatter. Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you throw him out? Why didn't you leave me?" Julian sighed, a sound of profound weariness and relief. He sat down on the edge of a chaise lounge. "Because I was lonely, Elena. And I knew you were lonely too. We've been living in a house of glass for years, careful not to break anything, but dying of thirst inside. I didn't have the strength to be the fire you needed. I had become the stone. And I realized I didn't want to lose you, but I couldn't watch you fade away anymore." He looked at Marcus. "I love you like a brother, Marcus. And I knew if anyone was going to wake her up, I wanted it to be someone who would cherish her. Someone I trusted." The silence that followed was the heaviest thing I had ever felt. It wasn't the silence of a grave. It was the silence of a new world being born. "You wanted this?" I asked, the words feeling strange in my mouth. Julian looked up at me, his eyes shining in the moonlight. "I wanted you to be happy. I wanted to feel a spark in this house again, even if I wasn't the one to strike the match. I've been watching you both. Sometimes from the doorway, sometimes just listening to the change in your breathing. It woke something up in me too. Seeing you desired, seeing you wanted. It reminded me of why I fell in love with you in the first place." He stood up and walked toward us. He took my hand and then, to my utter shock, he took Marcus's hand. "I don't want a divorce," Julian said firmly. "And I don't want you to leave tomorrow, Marcus. Not yet." "Julian, what are you saying?" Marcus asked, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm saying that the boundaries we built were too rigid. They were suffocating us, Julian said. He looked at me, his gaze deep and searching. I want to share this. I want us to be a family in whatever way that looks like. I've been lonely for so long, Elena. I don't want to be lonely anymore. I want to be part of the warmth Marcus brought back into your life. I looked from Julian to Marcus. The betrayal I had felt earlier was replaced by a dizzying sense of possibility. The man I loved was offering me a way to keep the fire without losing the hearth. Julian pulled me toward him, and for the first time in years, the kiss wasn't a polite habit. It was hungry. It was possessive. And then he looked over my shoulder at Marcus. Don't just stand there, Julian whispered. The night that followed was a blur of shadows and light. We moved back into the master bedroom, the large ornate space that had felt like a tomb for so long. Now it felt like a sanctuary. There were no more secrets. The air was no longer thick with guilt. It was thick with a different kind of tension, one that was shared and acknowledged. Julian sat on the edge of the bed, watching as Marcus approached me. The dynamic had shifted. It wasn't a betrayal anymore. It was a symphony. Marcus's hands were hesitant at first, looking to Julian for permission. Julian gave a small, encouraging nod. When Marcus touched me, it felt different, bold, supported, and intensely erotic. The knowledge that Julian was watching, that he was wanting this, added a layer of heat that nearly drove me to my knees. I felt Julian's hands join the dance, his touch familiar and grounding, while Marcus was the wild, unpredictable storm. I was the center of their universe, pulled between two gravitational forces that were no longer at war. We spoke very little. We didn't need to. Our bodies told the story. It was a story of rediscovery. I felt the rough texture of Marcus's palms against the silk of my skin, and the soft, deliberate caress of Julian's fingers tracing the lines of my neck. We were a tangle of limbs and breath, our hearts beating in a frantic, beautiful discord that somehow found a rhythm. In the quiet moments between the waves of intensity, we leaned against each other. Julian held my hand, and Marcus rested his head on my shoulder. The loneliness Julian had spoken of seemed to evaporate in the heat of our shared presence. As the sun began to peek through the curtains, casting a soft pink glow over the room, I felt a peace I hadn't known in a decade. The cheating was gone, replaced by a complex, honest, and terrifyingly beautiful truth. Marcus didn't leave the next day. He stayed. We had to navigate a world that wouldn't understand. To our neighbors and our families, we remained the same. Julian and Elena, with their close friend Marcus staying in the guest suite. But behind the closed doors of our home, the clock stopped ticking so loudly. The silence was gone. If you felt that shift right there, comment heartside below so I know you caught it. And if you haven't hit subscribe yet, now's the time, because what happens next is going to change everything between them. We established new rules, new boundaries. Some nights were just for Julian and me. Reconnecting, talking, finding the spark in the quiet. Some nights were for the three of us, a celebratory dance of affection and heat. And sometimes Marcus and I would find our stolen moments, but they were no longer stolen. They were gifts acknowledged and accepted. Julian changed. The distant look in his eyes vanished. He was more present, more vocal, more alive. He told me later that the sharing saved him. It took the pressure off him to be everything for me, and in doing so, allowed him to be himself again. Marcus became the bridge between us. He brought a vitality that forced us out of our ruts. We traveled together, we laughed more, and we lived with an intensity that most people never experience. I remember one afternoon months later. We were in the garden, the sun warm on our faces. Julian was reading a book, his feet propped up on a stone bench. Marcus was helping me prune the roses. I looked back at the house, the grand silent building that had once felt like a cage. It wasn't a cage anymore. It was a home. Marcus caught my eye and smiled, a secret, knowing look. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead, his touch lingering. I looked over at Julian. He was watching us, his book forgotten. He didn't look jealous. He looked at peace. He winked at me and went back to his reading. I realized then that love isn't a pie with limited slices. It's a fire. The more wood you give it, the brighter it burns. We had found a way to keep the fire going, to turn a betrayal into a bridge, and to find a sweetness in the twist that no one would ever see coming. The guilt was a distant memory, a ghost that had been exorcised by the light of honesty. I was a wife, I was a lover, and I was a woman who was no longer invisible. Caught between admiration and desire, I had found a place where I didn't have to choose. As the evening shadows grew long, we walked back into the house together. 3 hearts, 1 home, and a love that was as unconventional as it was profound. The ticking of the clocks no longer sounded like a countdown. It sounded like a heartbeat. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the dark. Because I knew that when the sun went down, the fire would still be burning, warm and bright, shared by the only 2 men who truly saw me. The journey wasn't always easy. There were moments of doubt, moments where old insecurities would flare up like a dying ember. But we talked. We really talked. Julian confessed his fears of being replaced, and Marcus confessed his fear of overstepping. We held each other through the uncertainty, and each time we came out stronger. I learned that intimacy isn't just about the physical acts. It's about the vulnerability of being seen in all your complexity. It's about the courage to say, "This is what I need," and the grace of the people who love you to say, "I can give you that." One rainy night, much like the one where it all began, we were all in the large master bed. The sound of the rain on the roof was a rhythmic lullaby. Julian was behind me, his arms wrapped around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. Marcus was in front of me, his eyes locked on mine, his hand stroking my hair. "Are you happy, Elena?" Julian whispered into my ear. I looked at Marcus, then closed my eyes and felt the steady beat of Julian's heart against my back. The heat, the safety, the sheer, overwhelming love in the room was almost too much to bear. "I'm more than happy," I breathed. "I'm whole." And as the storm raged outside, inside the walls of our sanctuary, there was only warmth, the scent of cedar and rain, and the beautiful tangled reality of a life lived without shadows. We were no longer hiding in the dark. We had invited the light in, and it had turned our world into something extraordinary. The secret wasn't a burden anymore. It was the foundation. And as I drifted off to sleep, held by the 2 men who had saved me from the silence, I knew that this was exactly where I was meant to be. The boundaries were gone, and in their place we had built a world where love had no limits, and the only rule was to never let the fire go out. The end of the story wasn't an end at all. It was a beginning. Every morning was a new discovery. Every night a new celebration. We had taken the fragments of a breaking marriage and the sparks of a forbidden attraction and forged something unbreakable. People often ask me the secret to a long marriage. I just smile and think of my house, the 2 men waiting for me, and the beautiful complex dance we perform every day. I tell them it's about honesty. I tell them it's about not being afraid of the hunger. But mostly I just tell them that love is much bigger than we are taught to believe. And as I walk up the path to my front door, hearing the low murmur of their voices from inside, I know I'm the luckiest woman alive. Because I don't just have a husband and I don't just have a lover. I have a life that is vibrant, full, and utterly beautifully ours. The twist hadn't just shocked me, it had set me free. And in that freedom, I had finally found the woman I was always meant to be. The house was no longer quiet. It was alive with the sound of laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the soft, steady hum of three lives intertwined. It was a symphony of the unconventional, a masterpiece of the heart. And as I stepped inside, the warmth enveloped me, a promise kept every single day. I looked at the wedding ring on my finger, then at the man who gave it to me, and then at the man who had helped him remember why he did. I realized then that sometimes the best way to keep a promise is to change the way you keep it. And in our house, the promises were written in the heart, kept in the heat, and celebrated in every lingering glance and shared breath. We were home. If this story stayed with you the way it stayed with me writing it, subscribe to Hearthside Stories and turn on notifications, because there's a new story dropping soon, and trust me, you don't want to miss where this one goes next. And if you want more slow burn love stories just like this, I've got a whole world of them waiting for you, right here on the channel.